Thanks so much. It's a real honor to be here. It feels like a historical kind of event, doesn't it? All this conversation about literally world-changing technology, and here we are sitting here. This is the kind of moment we might look back on and go, I remember when we were talking about that, and then reality happens. So I'm going to, broadly speaking, keep this very practical, but also focus on your business. Like, how does this stuff actually help your business? It's very common, in rooms around business, talk about people who are tech savvy or not tech savvy, and there's a sort of spectrum there. If you're on that spectrum, then I'm more towards the not tech savvy side of things. There's some people here with businesses who have the extremely tech savvy kind of stuff to talk about, which is really exciting, really, really cool. But you can breathe a sigh of relief if you were hoping for something a little bit more digestible along the way. I'm your man. So, first of all, this is probably the only thing I would say, this is the biggest takeaway if you're going to start thinking about implementing AI in a business. This is the thing that you really need to get right. First and foremost, recognize that it's all about data, because this unlocks a ton of stuff around how you then go about to use this technology and the technology that's about to come out next week and the week after, which nobody knows about yet. So ultimately, it comes down to data in a business. Now, this is going to be so obvious to some of us, but it may not be. It's amazing how often this conversation comes up, and it's just not been thought through clearly. So, really simple, every business involves information. That's just a fundamental fact. Every business has always involved information which needs to be managed and used. So that information has to live somewhere. It's possible to run a business. I mean, the plumber who comes to my house, his business is run largely in his head. His brain is his business system. Because wherever your information lives is your business system. As soon as you get into a cleverer, more advanced business, you can't possibly run it inside people's heads. So it needs to live in something. So where does it actually live? The thing is that good business systems enable effective AI and automation. So if your information is accessible, then you can much more quickly take up these technologies and get real value from them. If the information is in lots of places that are not accessible, you're really, really hampered. That's your first problem. Deal with the data layer and then come on to using these automation tools. This is the way I like to kind of bring this home. Here's a little AI-generated cartoon. So this is a very common scenario. I'm sure there'll be lots of nodding heads. You'll recognize you've done this. So you need to work with some business data, but the system on your computer, whatever that is, your CRM or your lack of any software at all perhaps, doesn't let you do what you need. It could be a very advanced ERP system, but you just don't have the feature, the thing you need to do. So you need to get something done. This needs done. There's a report that needs to be created. There's an analysis that needs to be done. There's a thing that needs to happen in the real world. So you need to build a solution. Now, the tool we reach for is Excel a lot of the time because it's 40 years old. It just recently had its 40-year-old anniversary. Spreadsheets a lot of us have grown up through our entire careers on computers thinking in terms of spreadsheets. Now, a spreadsheet is an incredible innovation, but we're now using it, lots and lots of people are using it to essentially build software inside a spreadsheet, which is not the right tool for the job anymore, although it is a great tool. The danger with this is that then what you end up with is a sort of spreadsheet explosion where there's chaos because information is in spreadsheets all over the place that are fragile, that break, that only one person in the organization knows how to use it and edit it. All sorts of things go wrong. And it's a huge innovation on doing it manually or in people's heads, but it's a real problem when it comes to implementing AI and automation. So if you are experiencing that spreadsheet symptom, then that's maybe a sign your systems aren't good enough because the data is siloed, disconnected, never up to date, and data wants to be connected. However, this is good news because if you have a million spreadsheets and don't have a proper system, you are sitting on an amazing opportunity to massively increase the productivity and ease of use of your business systems. AI and automation need to get to your data to be effective. So well-structured systems is the first thing you need, and that will also enable you to keep control. It's been mentioned a bit already, but you need guardrails around what you do with AI, and if the information is coming from all over the place, you're going to struggle to keep control because you don't have visibility. But a good underlying system gives you that control for everything you do subsequently. I'm just going to kind of skip through this, but there's loads of benefits of a good system. All software, in fact, all kind of data type systems work like this. There's a layer where the data lives, there's a layer with business logic and integrations, and then there's the actual user interface. And every piece of software you use on a computer essentially works like this. And a good system It allows you to get data that's as real-time as possible. If you can sort of operate with real-time data, you can make real-time decisions. If you have to wait for the data to come in and be processed and then handed to you in a weekly report or something, then you're working on a weekly basis. And AI is instant, so your data needs to be available as instantly as possible. So that opens up lots of questions around how do you bring that information in, and there are lots of very practical solutions to that in terms of how you then gather that information, digitize it immediately, and bring it into your core data layer. But this is also a key point, that if you can define your processes first of all and say, how ideally would we work? What's our competitive advantage? What's our unique selling point for how we do the thing we do that we're most proud of? The best thing to do is to define that process and then say, how do we get a system to make us always work like that? But the reality is a lot of us have got software in our businesses where the tools tell us how we should work and we just go along with it, like good little business owners. Salesforce or something tells us this is how you must do this process, so therefore we just do it that way. But ideally, it's not like that. You define the ideal process and then you build a system that makes you stick to it. And there's loads of benefits of having a really good business system, visibility, lack of human error, and of course, powerfully being able to then automate things. There's also team benefits of this. I'm going to come back to this at the end, but there's a huge human wealth, human value created by having better systems in general, and AI is the huge multiplier of this, that you can actually see how this connects directly to people's work being better, and that means their lives are better. So there's a real positive side of this. Okay, I'm going to slow down slightly now that I've got the introduction out of the way. This is the automation part. This is my favorite Peter Drucker quote, slightly simplified. Efficiency is doing things right. Effectiveness is doing the right thing. There's a real danger that we panic about being left behind in this AI world. We jump in and we start automating everything we do, and what we're essentially doing is just doing the wrong thing faster and better, faster and more, not necessarily better, but just faster. That's not helping anyone. You see this a lot with the AI slop that's being generated. The internet's filling up with these sort of bots creating stuff that nobody's reading, but that it's just taking up resources. And this is a real cultural problem that we have to face, because we're very efficiently doing the wrong things. I don't know if you know the little acronym TL:DR, too long, didn't read, but there's now a new version, AI DR. I just don't read that because someone AI generated something. I'm not going to read it because they didn't read it. They didn't write it. So why should I waste my time reading it? This is a problem. We don't want to just be more efficient. We need to be doing the right things. There's also a difference between AI tools that we use, where we could say we're using AI, and actually automating and building AI into our systems. So these are, many, many more than this. These are your kind of big hitter AI tools where you can just log in, type in the chat interface, get it to do stuff, copy and paste that somewhere else. And that's great, that's powerful. This is what these point solutions that Gary was talking about that a lot of people are already at. But there's a whole automation layer that is becoming is less obvious to people. So the tools that have been around for quite a while, Zapier, Make, NAN, these are tools that allow you to build automations that say, if this happens, then do that, then do that, then do that. And I'll show you in a second how that works. But these are very powerful. But now we've got tools like OpenClaw and Claude Cowork. This is, cutting edge. Cowork just kind of came out. And these are AI automation tools that sit. People have got these running on like a little Mac Mini, and it literally sits there and it runs stuff on your computer. Claude Cowork, I was using, let me just skip ahead a little bit and come back to it. I got Claude Cowork to book me onto this event. I didn't actually finish the booking, but it did the whole thing for me. You can just say, book me onto the Agentic 26 event. That's the only context it needs, and it will just go ahead into the browser, and it will carry on and do all this stuff. But it's doing it on my computer. It's not doing it on some internet computer. So I can also tell it to go alphabetize all the files that exist on my C drive on my computer. It will go and do that, literally on my computer. So this is the kind of thing that we're now talking about, very, very practical automation. And OpenClaw is an open source tool. So it used to be called ClaudeBot, and it had another name, Moltbot, in the middle as well. So these tools are now getting more and more accessible. They're also getting to the point where, from a security perspective, you can run these things offline. So you can download an open source AI, put it on a £4,000 gaming PC that sits in the corner of your office and has no internet connection, completely air-gapped. So you can have your local AI that's nowhere near as powerful as the sort of bleeding edge frontier models, but it'll do a lot of great stuff, generating text and so on, without you having to take any risks with the internet being involved. So this is what's possible, but in order for these tools to be effective, you have to have a good system and data available in the first place. Just to touch briefly on automation, I like showing this example. This is something that we built internally at Farsight, my company. There's no AI in this. This is just an automation. It was a problem I had with, a lot of us probably use Xero for accounts. I got really annoyed with the fact that the little magic Xero email address you can forward an invoice to, and it'll very nicely put it into Xero. But it didn't handle if I got sent an invoice that was just the body of an email, there was no attachment. So there's other solutions available for this, but I thought I'm just going to build a little solution. So I now just label it in my email. This automation picks that from my email and takes it off to a little decision where it goes, okay, is there an attachment? Is it a PDF? Great, send it off to Xero. It gets added to the accounts, no problem. If not, it sends it off to pdf.co, turns the email itself into a PDF, attaches it to a new email and sends that off, and then archives it off in my email as well. So with a single sort of keyboard shortcut, that whole process happens in the background and it handles those exceptions. It's a really, really simple example. This is built in make.com. And so this is an example of just an automation with no AI. Here's an example of an automation that we built for a client. This one is automation with AI. So now the part of the process that was happening that would have been copying and pasting into, in this case, it's a ChatGPT one, is now handled entirely by the automation, but in a way that's visual, that can be seen. So it's not like an AI agent where it all happens invisibly in the background and you can't see how it did what it did. But this is a visual, hand-built automation, so you retain a lot of control. This one picks up email inquiries and then does an awful lot of things with that. It assesses it using AI, triages it, and then it can go through various processes of alerting people in their chat system, in their case it's Google Chat, putting it into their job management system, assigning it to people, and updating other systems. And it does all of that as a combination of scripted automation and AI working together. And this particular example enabled that company to scale significantly without having to add anyone new to the team. So it just leveraged the power of the people who are responsible for answering the email inquiries. And then there's Claude Cowork, which can do all these things on your computer. I really like this decision. This is a helpful way of thinking about things. This is a slightly changed version of one that was Make.com shared at their Make Waves conference earlier, just last year. You don't need AI for everything. This is a sort of celebration and an exciting look at what we can do with Agentic AI. But the first thing to understand is this the right technology? Are we doing the right thing, or are we just trying to do things faster? You definitely do need AI if you need thinking, and that means non-deterministic tasks where a human would need to be involved to make a decision, to think around things. But you don't need AI if things are deterministic. And in fact, you could still use it, but you might be far better not. You might be far better with a script, with an automation, because then you can keep things very tightly controlled. And you do give up some control when you bring on an AI, and then it's harder work to keep things managed. It can also just be more expensive. You could have a virtually zero-cost automation, or you could be paying for AI usage credits every time you run the automation. So it's worth knowing that there are tools and there's options for both of these possibilities. However, there's a twist in the tail, which is something that I think is perhaps not being talked about nearly enough in business circles. That I think I'm calling it a code comeback. It's slightly tongue-in-cheek, but just go back in history for a little bit. Before the internet, only people who could write code could make computers do stuff. You have to get in there and you have to write some code. So coders were powering the whole thing. But then we moved on, and coders made software that could do stuff. So then we could just buy some software, install it on a CD-ROM, and then we'd have some software on our computer that could do it. Then the internet came along, and those became sort of online tools. Then no-code came along, and that was a whole wave where you had then a tool that could build something, like you had a Wix that could build you a website with a drag-and-drop editor, and then you had tools like Airtable that you could build quite complex applications in without having to create anything or write any code, but kind of like a really powerful spreadsheet. Then AI came along, and now AI agents, and we're now in the position where these AI agents, as Gary referred to, are writing code at insane speeds and insane quality. So we're now at the point where you can actually just get the AI to write you some code, like it would have been in the old days. You don't need a whole suite of tools. You don't need Make or Zapier or NAN. You could get AI to write you a script that does what they do anyway, without the interface, without all those layers. And it's good enough, and it's verifiable. And you can then run it on very lightweight architecture, even offline. So we're in this kind of space, and these are the sort of tools that are leading the way there. There's loads more in this sort of vibe coding space. You might have heard that term. I don't like that term very much. I think it's hiding what is an incredibly powerful move, people are starting to talk about disposable software. So you don't have to have a full software development program for it if you only need a small contained piece of software that's kind of internal and quite low risk. You can just make AI, get AI to make you one using these sorts of very user-friendly tools, and you can then use it to do the thing that you need to do. There is obviously an enormous question here around security, because if you make a piece of software that's got, as they very often do, has a huge gaping security hole in it, and then you publish that, then you're going to get hacked, and that could be hugely damaging and massive consequences. But if you're going to keep something in-house and it's not using sensitive data, these are incredibly powerful tools. Claude would be the one that is leading the way on this. Just a bit of a silly example. There's lots of examples I could use from businesses, but they don't have permission to share them, because people are quite sensitive about how they're using this stuff, because the idea of AI-generated code, people immediately think, oh, that's really irresponsible. Actually, people are just getting on with it and getting amazing results. This is something my daughter made. She's 13. I showed her Lovable, which is the sort of fastest growing one of these. Lovable actually broke a record. Nobody's even talking about this. They broke a record for, I think, the fastest to 100 million annual recurring revenue, faster than ChatGPT or OpenAI. And it just happened, but because this is just out there, but people are not really talking about it. She's studying GCSE classics, and she's got her Greek vocabulary. It's all wonderful and nerdy. But she needed to work through this vocabulary list, which her teacher gave her as a PDF. So she was talking to me about it. Greek's one of my hobbies as well. So we were chatting about how she could do this. She could make some flashcards. And I said, well, look, let's just make you a tool to help with this, because it's fun. So we went on to Lovable, and in a single prompt, we made this. And then it refined it a little bit later with some more. It's just a flashcard app. You just click on it, it flips around, shows you the answer, flips back, tracks how many you got right. You can set some parameters for, don't ask me this again when I've got it right 4 times in a row. Tell me just the beta words or just the theta words. You can, and it's a 13-year-old made this. So if we're now in the territory where 13-year-olds can make really useful tools that are just serve a purpose that they have in front of them, we need to be doing that in businesses as well, because as long as it's done safely, this is the way to go. But there are security and ethical concerns. So there's some thoughts here. There's lots and lots more that could be said about this. This is a whole conference in itself, how to use AI with security in mind. But there's a lot of this is common sense. Using something that has no information in it, that is sensitive and which is not connected up to the rest of your systems, it's pretty safe. It's just like using the internet. But there's lots of things that immediately become really unsafe. So you need to be careful who's using these things. But I'm particularly interested in the ethics. I just want to finish on this, really. All this opportunity is there. It's very practical. It's also very, very accessible, because you could just get an AI tool like ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini or whatever to just walk you through this stuff and help you with it. You don't need an expert to sort of get you started. But there's a huge burden on us to decide this question: should we be doing this? That's very funny. The word agent. Agency is about who's making the decisions, who's driving the bus, and some of the stuff that Gary shared. That we're showing that the agency's passing over to the agents. Now, this is a decision that we as humanity get to make. Do we want that? Is that the future we choose to live in, or is it not? And every one of us can make that decision, and it's a collective impact of 1,000 tiny decisions that gets us there. So I think we need to be really mindful of that, and not just use AI like it's a harmless, neutral tool. It's every choice we make with these tools is important. So using resources wisely, don't just creating slop, putting some extra work in to say, how can I make this as useful as possible for the person who's going to pick it up next? And just ask the question, should I be doing this at all? And I think the shorthand for this is just these 2 words: be human. We're dealing with artificial intelligence. So how do we make sure that we keep on being human? One of those aspects is, although we could automate everything, I think the winners will be the people who choose not to automate the bits where the human touches. I don't want to go into a coffee shop and be served by a robotic barista. I want to talk to someone, chat to them, ask how their day's been. That's why I go into the coffee shop, as well as to get the flat white. So those who keep those human elements, I think, will win. Somebody said this phrase, I think it's really helpful: no counterfeit humans. By all means, have a chatbot, have a voice agent, have an automated system, but let it declare itself as AI and let people use it knowingly. Don't fool people into thinking they're dealing with a human when they're not dealing with a human, because that leaves a really nasty taste in people's mouths. Let's just be open about it and not counterfeit humans. And ultimately, we can focus on freeing people up to have more life in what they do by automating away the things that are kind of not very life-giving parts of their work, to encourage them to do the parts that are life-giving. I'm quite an optimist, so I think we can do this. There are going to be job losses, and I think that will maybe come up in the panel. There are going to be areas of work that just vanish. It's an industrial revolution, but we can choose how we implement it in our businesses to keep on to that focus of being more human and ensuring people have more life from what they do, rather than just trying to focus on taking people's jobs away. So I hope that's been helpful, and I look forward to answering some questions in the panel.